Shalom. Wanted to come to you again, and I think as I've been expressing a little bit, I tend to feel that we're in the midst of an era change. We're going from one era into another one. And like a lot of you have heard me teach over the years, God had a promise for Abraham. He was going to be the father of many nations, sands of the sea, all of that. But the challenge he had is that as God wanted to communicate to Abraham, Abraham didn't have the capacity to understand the ramifications and dynamics and the applications where he was. God knew that if he shared that with him in the current context, he'd apply it to his relatives, his family lineage. The land was small and so forth. So he said, Abraham, I'm going to talk to you, but we have to have that conversation over there. I felt like around October, the Lord said something similar to me as Dave. The change that is about to come, or that you're headed into, is going to be very, very large. Like I said, I believe it's going to be an era change. And right now, don't overwork it. Pay attention. I've spent my whole life trying to pray for the spirit of Daniel, especially understand the days in which we're headed and so forth. He said, but don't overwork it. Observe and pay attention, because a lot of what will happen will be on the other side of this change. And so, what I'm starting to enter into in these videos that I'm doing is I'm trying to, in a sense, head us a little bit more towards that era with a little bit less dynamics to try and interpret exactly what's going on. But I do want to touch something I think that is very current in some of what we're going through. As I was involved in doing that, I felt like the Lord spoke a word to me. He says, Dave, you need to learn right now to live above your context. And I'll explain that. It was actually really, really helpful because we're all having certain things we're trying to juggle. For me, to give a little bit of a background on it, so we have land that we are trying to build a command center, different components of it, where seasoned intercessors can come together with strategic business people, political people, and work those strategies together. That's a huge part of that land development and so forth. We also have family in different parts of the world outside the country and so forth. Uh, just different components. Right now, we're spending a lot of time in Abbeville, South Carolina, doing work there. Um, the whole issue that God's put in our lifelong for decades is working with the Jewish people, trying to establish a Tennessee Israel Chamber of Commerce, working with the governor on some of the tour type stuff, all of that, which is COVID shut that down. So those have become like juggling balls. You can plug in things in your own life. The problem is those different things began to be in conflict with each other. They actually started to be things that were wearing me down in my mental and overall emotional stability, so to speak, because as I would work on one, I had to figure out how it fit into the other, like a juggler. Just didn't have to catch the one, I had to understand how to catch the other and synchronize these things, and it really was wearing me out, specifically around this election season. So that's when the Lord says, Dave, I want you to learn to live above your context. So now I've kind of let all that go. I'm living full in each one of these contexts when I'm in that space. Now, I just want to encourage you to do that for two reasons. Don't try and necessarily arrange and make a lot of sense of a lot of things that are going on now. Let me come at this from a little bit of a different angle. Right now, the atmosphere. So I think we understand a little bit. If you live in a cloudy day, if you live in the north of Russia and so forth, it can be really difficult. There's an atmospheric context going on in America right now that is very, very difficult. And so it's not a season. Let me say this. I don't believe it's a season to pay much attention to your mind. Being in your mind right now is not necessarily the best place to be, because the atmosphere is affecting our thinking. It's affecting our perspectives. It's affecting our identity. And so in the atmosphere right now, we definitely have got strong components of chaos. There is a lot of chaos out there. There's a lot of not being able to understand what's going on. There are components like the Rubik's Cube, you try and put that together. There are things that are not going to fit together right now in your cerebral sphere. They're too big, they're too large, they're too overwhelming. We don't know what's going on with it. And so to spend time in that space will wear you down. The weather system's the problem. So not only does that affect our ability to understand where we're going and what's going on, but we know that the enemy likes to take things and put them deep into our heart. So that can come into our own identity. And I've heard a lot of that of people lately, because so they take this confusion and this chaos that's out there, but it's in here because we're trying to figure it out. And because of that, it gets down into our soul. Then we try to figure out who are we, where we're going, what's going on. And so I would just encourage you to spend less time in your mind right now. It's not a profitable space. So if you're not going to spend time in your mind, and I'm not saying go dumb, obviously everybody's got to way pay attention, but pull back. That scripture where God talks about, he pulled Elijah into this quiet place. Pull aside for a season into a quieter place. And some of that quieter place will be things like having a life filled with praise. It's a time to have worship. Be strong in your life right now, filled with praise. It's also a really good time to pull out thankful lists. What are you thankful for? Just review it. Pull out things that God's done in your life, victories He's given, words He's given, miracles where He's come through, where healings and stuff. That's a place to like fill your container now, and a little bit less time in your mind. The second thing I'd like to bring out is in this whole concept of an era shift. I'd like to deal with a couple of eras so you'll know my general frame of reference of where the body is at in its maturation process. Is I tend to feel that the body really came together starting around 1970, 69, 70, 71. That's when a lot of the current leaders came in. And so that would put us, at about at the 50-year mark. Well, right before 2000, the mental context where most people came from for centuries, basically unchanged for centuries until 2000, was the real fundamental biblical value of deny yourself and take up your cross. Solid bedrock. It led for a life that had self-denial. You were ready and able to take care of conflict or obstacles or persecution. It was just a mindset that was there. The challenge is it pretty much left us with an anemic Christianity in some ways. Because if you're always denying yourself, you actually don't really know who you are. And so we were more slaves as opposed to sons. We were in the context of living a diminished life that was filled with sacrifice. And so at 2000, the fatherhood message came along. And it was really, really a strong message. It was so needed. Because then we became sons and daughters. We're here to be heirs, to represent. So instead of walking around wounded because we didn't deal with anything, now we became whole. We not only became whole, but we're in a place where we actually know how to release wholeness into other people's lives. We understand how to release healing. We can sit down now and talk to people about and give words of knowledge to their life. We've moved into commerce. We've moved into government. We've moved into education. All of that came about because of the fatherhood of God was released. And so it's been an incredibly significant, needed adjustment. And in that context, I said to my wife, Peggy, I said, when it first came out, right in the beginning, I said, this is so healthy and so crucial for where we need to go. I said, but one of the challenges in it is that we're leaving off the idea of dealing with suffering or difficulty or sacrifice or denying ourselves. That's kind of off the table now. And because of that, I said that one day that could cause us some problems. And I feel like we're at that day. And so as we shift into this era, you might say, well, are we really prepared for it? And I would say, yes. That adjustment was fantastic because now we are prepared, we are full and so forth, but we're not quite equipped to deal with suffering and adversity. All those who desire to live godly will suffer persecution. And I'll talk about some, not so persecution, difficulties. I'll talk about that a little bit more in the future. I'm trying to do some videos that help us move from this cushy, self-comforting Christianity that we've had into a place where we'll be equipped to deal with adversity. But emotionally and spiritually, we are equipped. It would have been disastrous to hit difficult times and been slaves and not be full and not be equipped and not be ready to deal with impacting our world for the gospel. And so we're in a really good spot for that. And so now we're in this place of going forward and we're prepared. And so as we do that, though, part of this transition and going into this next era, what I'd really like to do is I'd like you to listen to what I said here. And then there's a video done by Steve Berger that's right on my stream. Go there after this video. That starts, and others are starting to portray the era in which we're going. And so if you look at that and go to that, and so just in kind of wrapping up, don't spend a lot of time in your mind. It's not a profitable place right now. And be in a spot where, as we go through this transition, realize that we really are equipped. It's just the nature of the ball game is going to change. So, bless you. Thank you for listening. Look forward to being with you again.